Fiancé cheated with stepsister and now wants my inheritance. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. 3 weeks after sleeping with my stepsister, my ex-fiancé showed up begging outside my door. Caleb said it softly, like the neighbors might hear him. "Naomi, please. Just let me explain." I stood there with my apartment chain still latched, one hand gripping the wood so hard my knuckles hurt. He looked exactly the way manipulative men always look when consequences become real. Expensive coat, tired eyes, practiced regret. The only new thing was the panic. Caleb had never come to me panicked before. When we were together, panic was for people with messy lives and unpaid balances. Caleb preferred polished lies and controlled rooms. I was 29, a middle school librarian, and according to him, that meant I lived in a world made of stickers, overdue books, and tiny ambitions. He used to kiss my forehead and call me safe, like it was a compliment. I thought it meant steady. I eventually learned he meant ordinary. Easy to underestimate. Easy to come back to when his other options failed. "What exactly are you sorry for?" I asked through the crack. Sleeping with Sienna, lying to my face for months, or showing up right after probate. His expression changed for just a second. Remorse slipped. Calculation flashed. Then he recovered. "This isn't about money." That sentence told me more than if he'd confessed everything. 2 days earlier, Attorney Monroe had read my grandmother's will in a quiet office that smelled like coffee and old paper. I inherited her bungalow, her investment account, and the trust she'd kept private from almost everyone. Not fantasy money, but enough to change my life, enough to pay off debt, enough to make greedy people suddenly remember my number. By that night, Caleb was standing outside my apartment with flowers I knew he hadn't chosen himself. I should explain how a woman ends up watching her ex-fiancé beg for access to a future he helped destroy. I should explain why my own stepsister knew how to smile at me while sleeping with the man I planned to marry. I should explain why my grandmother's last gift felt, for one awful week, like bait dropped into shark water. Because Caleb didn't just come back with apologies. He came back with a script, a timeline, and a reason. Then I saw what he was hiding behind his back. Before everything broke, people talked about our wedding like it was a community project. My mother kept saying, "This is exactly what our family needs," every time she toured venues with me. Like white roses and a champagne wall could somehow fuse a blended family into something seamless. Caleb loved that line. He'd squeeze my waist and say, "See, we're healing generations." He said things like that a lot. Vague, warm sentences that made him sound deeper than he was. Sienna was my stepsister, younger by 2 years and emotionally younger by 10. She had the kind of beauty strangers rewarded without asking questions. She and I never had one clean fight. We had 100 tiny competitions stretched over 12 years. Whose dress got complimented, whose birthday dinner got more attention, whose heartbreak got treated like a tragedy instead of a lesson. When my mother married Sienna's father, everyone expected sisterhood. We gave them a performance version of it. Shared holiday photos. Forced laughter. Matching pajamas one Christmas. But there was always something sharp under the wrapping paper. The engagement made it worse because Caleb was the first thing Sienna couldn't casually take from me. At least that's what I believed then. He proposed in my grandmother's backyard under the string lights she kept up year-round because she said a house should look ready for joy even when nobody felt it. I cried. He cried. Sienna cried too, which should have unsettled me more than it did. "I'm just so happy for you," she said, hugging me too hard. "You finally won." Won. Not found love. Not built a life. Won. A week later, I brought swatches and seating charts to my mother's house, and I found Caleb in the kitchen with Sienna, both laughing, both too quiet when I walked in. Sienna lifted a forkful of cake tasting leftovers and held it to his mouth like it was nothing. He took the bite. She wiped frosting from his lip with her thumb. He looked embarrassed. She didn't. "Oh my God," she said when she saw me. "Relax. I'm not stealing your groom." Everybody laughed, including me, because sometimes humiliation wears such a bright color you mistake it for harmlessness. At the time, I laughed, and that was my first mistake. The first red flags were so ordinary they made me feel stupid for noticing them. Caleb started putting his phone face down even when we were alone. Then he changed his passcode after 2.5 years of acting like privacy was for people with secrets. His explanation came ready-made. One of the guys at work got hacked. I'm just being careful. He kissed my temple when he said it, as if affection could sand down suspicion. Then there were the disappearances that came dressed as errands. 10 minutes to grab gas became 45. A quick stop at his condo after work somehow took 2 hours. He missed a call with our florist because traffic was insane. Yet his shirt smelled faintly of Sienna's perfume later that evening. Amber and orange blossom. The one she wore too heavily because she believed leaving a trace was the same thing as leaving an impression. I noticed. I ignored it. That was my pattern then. Observe, excuse, swallow. Sienna got stranger too, though with her it was less about silence and more about performance. She started calling Caleb my favorite almost brother-in-law, in this teasing voice that made people smile. She touched him more than she needed to. Shoulder squeezes. Private jokes. Leaning into him when everyone was gathered in the kitchen. If I stiffened, she'd grin like I was boring. One Thursday in April, I called Caleb during my lunch break because the bakery needed a final head count for mini desserts. He didn't answer. 10 minutes later he texted, in a meeting. Can't talk. At 1:14 p.m. Sienna posted a story from a rooftop bar downtown. It was just a boomerang of glasses clinking, but in the corner of the frame I caught a cuff I recognized instantly. Navy suit. Silver watch. Caleb's hand. I stared at that story for so long the screen dimmed. When I asked him that night how his meeting went, he didn't even blink. Brutal, he said, loosening his tie. 2 hours of budget talk. Why? Because Sienna was at Solano's around 1. He shrugged. Okay, it's a city. People go places. That wasn't the lie that hurt. The lie that hurt came next. I haven't seen her all day. He said it easily, while opening a bottle of wine we'd picked for the reception. The lie was tiny, but it scraped against everything I knew. Once suspicion settles into your body, everything starts sounding like evidence. I hated that version of myself. The one checking timestamps, measuring silence. I kept telling myself I was becoming jealous, not observant. Caleb encouraged that interpretation. You know Sienna likes attention, he said one night as we folded invitation inserts at my apartment table. Don't let her bait you. It was the kind of statement manipulative people love, just enough truth to hide the larger lie. The concrete clue came on a Sunday. My mother hosted dinner because she wanted all of us in one room acting normal. Caleb arrived late, carrying flowers for her and kissing my cheek like he deserved points for showing up. Sienna drifted in 20 minutes after him, wearing heels too sharp for family meatloaf. During dessert, Caleb offered to help my mother bring dishes into the kitchen. Sienna went too. I followed because Annalise had texted asking if Grandma's old recipe box was still in the pantry, and I thought I'd look while everyone was distracted. As I passed the mudroom, I heard Sienna whisper, "You can't keep doing this at the house." Caleb answered in a low voice. Then stop texting me first. My whole body went cold. I didn't burst in. I wish I could tell you I was brave, but I stood there frozen with folded napkins in my hands, listening like a thief in my own family. Then Sienna laughed softly. You're the one getting married, remember? There was a pause, then the sound of a kiss. Not a maybe, not an almost. A kiss with the lazy confidence of repetition. I backed away so fast I hit the wall. Nobody noticed. By the time they walked back into the dining room, Caleb was carrying plates and Sienna was scrolling her phone. I watched them sit on opposite sides of the table and perform innocence so smoothly it made me feel insane. Later that night, I told myself maybe I heard wrong. Maybe the words meant something else. Denial is humiliating, but it's also protective. It gives you one last evening before the truth becomes your permanent address. That protection died when Caleb fell asleep on my couch and his phone lit up on the coffee table. Miss you already. Next time, lock the mudroom door. That was the moment denial stopped feeling safer than truth. I took a picture of the text before I woke him up. That detail matters because people always ask why women don't leave sooner, why we don't trust ourselves faster, why we need proof stacked like bricks before we let a life collapse. Betrayal makes you feel crazy first and furious second. By the time anger arrived, I wanted something that would survive his denial. Who is texting you about the mudroom at midnight? I asked. Caleb blinked awake, disoriented for maybe half a second before the lie machine started. He looked at the screen, then at me, then reached for the phone too quickly. It's not what you think. Great, I said. Tell me what locked mudroom hookups are supposed to mean. His jaw tightened. He sat up, rubbed both hands over his face, and switched tactics from confusion to exhaustion, as if I were inconveniencing him with my heartbreak. Naomi, listen to me. Sienna has been in a weird place lately. I laughed. You're going to explain your affair as a favor to her? It wasn't an affair. That word choice still makes me sick. Not didn't happen. Not you're wrong. Just a fight over branding. I called Sienna before I could lose my nerve. She answered on the fourth ring. What? You can come tell me yourself, or I can send Mom the screenshot. She arrived 20 minutes later in leggings and a hoodie, face bare. Caleb was standing by the window like a hostage negotiator who'd misplaced the hostages. I put the phone between them on the coffee table. Sienna crossed her arms. You went through his phone? He left the evidence on my table. Caleb started in with, it just happened, and we were confused, and nothing meant anything, while Sienna immediately went cruel. You always act like, because you're the responsible one, people should automatically choose you, she said. That's not how chemistry works. I swear there are some sentences that bruise louder than a slap. When my mother got there, because yes, Caleb called her, she looked at the screenshot, looked at Sienna, and said the most devastating thing a parent can say to a betrayed daughter. Naomi, maybe don't make this uglier than it already is. Then Sienna said something that made the room turn colder. Sienna looked me dead in the face and said, he was going to leave you eventually. There are betrayals you survive in stages. First the cheating, then the humiliation, then the moment somebody tries to rewrite your future as if your loss was inevitable. I threw them both out. My mother left with Sienna. Caleb texted 3 times before sunrise. Please calm down. You're not seeing this clearly. We can still fix the wedding narrative. Not the wedding, the narrative. The next 2 weeks were a blur of cancellations and small public deaths. I called the venue and lost a $3,000 deposit. I called the caterer and heard pity sharpen the woman's voice when she said, I'm so sorry, honey. I boxed up bridesmaid gifts in my living room and stared at monogrammed tote bags with a last initial that suddenly felt radioactive. Every errand became a tiny walk through embarrassment because enough people knew to glance at my left hand first. At work, I kept smiling at 6th graders checking out fantasy novels while my own life felt like it had been written by someone lazy and cruel. I cried in the staff bathroom between lunch periods. I stopped answering most calls. Caleb sent long messages about closure. Sienna sent none. That somehow hurt more. Her silence had the confidence of a person who believed she'd done nothing unforgivable. The worst part was how fast some family members adjusted. My mother started using phrases like complicated and adult choices, which are really just decorative covers for cowardice. One cousin told me, at least you found out before the wedding, like there was a discount bin for ruined lives. Annalise was the only one who came over without asking me to be reasonable. She brought soup, paper towels, and a legal pad because she believed grief made people forget practical things. You do not owe graceful, she told me. You owe yourself accuracy. I wanted revenge then, but not the cinematic kind. I wanted my heartbeat back. I wanted to stop imagining them together every time my apartment got quiet. I wanted one night of sleep where I didn't wake up bargaining with a version of my life that no longer existed. That should have been the end of them, but grief arrived first. My grandmother died 19 days after I called off the wedding. Grandma had been declining for months, but she was still herself the last time I saw her. Sharp eyes, soft cardigan, asking if Caleb had finally learned to listen without rehearsing his own response. She never trusted charm. Pretty words are cheap, she used to say. Watch what people do when being decent costs them. Doctor appointments, grocery runs, fixing the bird feeder, labeling her medications in giant black marker because she refused bifocals out of spite. None of it felt sacrificial. She was my safest place. Even after the engagement disaster, she didn't ask for a polished version. She just squeezed my hand and said, a broken promise is still useful if it keeps you from the wrong life. The funeral was small and rain-heavy. Sienna wore black sunglasses like she was attending a premiere. Caleb didn't come, which I appreciated until I learned later he'd asked my mother what kind of property Grandma still owned. A week after the service, Annalise drove me to Attorney Monroe's office for the probate meeting. I expected a lamp, some jewelry, maybe Grandma's recipe box. Instead, Monroe slid a folder toward me and explained, in plain English, that Grandma had updated her will 2 years earlier. She left me her bungalow outright. She left me the investment account she'd built from 30 years of quiet discipline. And she placed a separate trust in my name with enough in it to pay off my student loans and give me, for the first time in my life, breathing room. My mother looked stunned. Sienna looked offended. I felt sick. Monroe kept talking about beneficiaries, transfer timelines, and the difference between inherited separate property and shared marital property if I ever married. I barely heard him because all I could think was that Grandma had seen me. Not the useful version. Me. Then the room shifted. Sienna asked whether the bungalow could be kept in the family if I ever moved. My mother asked if I planned to sell. Annalise told me to tell no one the full amount of the account. That night, Caleb texted for the first time in 12 days. I heard about your grandmother. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? And suddenly Caleb started acting like our story still had pages. At first I thought the timing was gross, not strategic. People reappear after funerals because grief softens the edges of anger. They count on your exhaustion. They mistake your numbness for openness. So when Caleb sent flowers to the library with a card that read, "You shouldn't carry this alone," I rolled my eyes and threw the card away. Then he escalated. A playlist link titled Us. A photo of the coffee shop where we had our first date. An email at 1:07 a.m. saying, "I know I forfeited the right to comfort you, but I still know your heart." That line made me physically recoil. Men who betray you always talk about your heart like they still have a key. I ignored all of it until he caught me in the parking lot after work. He was leaning against his car in a navy sweater I used to love, holding 2 coffees he definitely remembered how to order. "Please don't leave," he said when I turned around. "I'm not the one who left." He winced, which I think he thought looked sincere. "I deserve that. You deserve a restraining order." He almost smiled, then corrected his face. "I know I handled everything horribly. I was selfish. I was weak. I let Sienna become a distraction when I was already spiraling." A distraction, like she was a sports app, and now? I asked. Now I know what mattered. I should have walked away then, but grief had made me curious in dangerous ways. What changed? He hesitated. It was tiny, but I saw it. Like he was choosing between answers. "Losing you," he said. That would have landed better if Sienna hadn't called me an hour later from my mother's house. Voice tight, with an emotion she was trying to disguise. "Are you talking to Caleb again?" I sat very still. "Why?" "No reason." "That sounds like a reason." She exhaled hard. "Just don't be stupid because Grandma left you a house." There it was. Not subtle. Not elegant. The inheritance was suddenly in the room with us, breathing. "What does my house have to do with Caleb?" I asked. "Nothing," she snapped too quickly. "I'm just saying he always liked nice things." I laughed once, sharp and joyless. "You mean mine?" She hung up. The next day Caleb texted, "I never cared about any of that. I miss you." Then Sienna grabbed my wrist and asked the wrong question. She cornered me after Grandma's memorial luncheon in the church fellowship hall, fingers digging into my wrist hard enough to leave pale crescents. "Did Monroe tell you exactly when the house transfers?" she asked. Not "how are you doing?" Not "are you holding up?" Straight to transfer timelines, like grief was an inconvenient hallway she wanted to push past. I pulled my arm back. "Why do you care?" Her eyes flicked toward the doorway where Caleb stood talking to my mother beside a tray of untouched sandwiches. That glance told me more than her answer. "I don't," she said. "I just think you shouldn't make impulsive decisions. Like sleeping with your stepsister's fiancé?" She flinched, but not with shame. With irritation. "You can keep throwing that around, but it doesn't change facts." "What facts?" "That Grandma always favored you." There it was under everything. Not romance, not chemistry, but the old hunger. She didn't just want what I had. She wanted the story in which she deserved it more. Later, while people stacked folding chairs, I walked past my mother's phone on the kitchen counter and heard it buzz with an incoming text. The preview flashed before the screen dimmed. Did she say whether the account is liquid yet? No name. Just the message. My stomach dropped so violently I had to grip the counter. My mother had never cared about investment terminology in her life. Neither had Sienna. But Caleb had once spent an entire dinner explaining why liquidity mattered more than net worth because cash is freedom. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The language itself was enough to drag older memories into a new shape. Caleb asking casual questions about probate delays. Sienna mocking my cute little dead lady cottage, but asking whether it had good resale value. My mother insisting I should take your time before making legal decisions. which sounded nurturing until you noticed who kept hovering nearby. Annalise found me in the pantry pretending to organize paper plates. You look like you've finally connected something, she said. I think they have too. She studied my face. Then stopped reacting and started documenting. I deleted nothing because I finally understood what I was hunting. Once I stopped hoping for innocence, the evidence started gathering itself. I checked the cloud album Caleb and I used to share for venue ideas and honeymoon screenshots. He had forgotten to remove one synced folder from his tablet backup before I gave it back after the breakup. Most of it was harmless: PDFs, receipts, a gym schedule. Then I found a notes file dated 11 days before our wedding invitations went out. Possible paths if Naomi inherits. Reconcile before transfer. Marriage equals easier influence. If she freezes me out, S can keep contact. House could be bridge move if sold for fresh start. I read it 5 times before my body caught up with my brain. S. Sienna. I took screenshots, emailed them to a new address, then called Annalise. She came over with her glasses already on, which was how I knew she'd braced for something bad. Do not confront yet, she said after reading the file. Find out whether this was fantasy or planning. So I kept going. I pulled old phone records and matched Caleb's late work nights with calls to Sienna that lasted 40, 60, 90 minutes. I searched my email trash and found a deleted vendor message from months earlier. The bridal suite booking I never made? Sienna had forwarded the quote to Caleb with one line attached. If this place works, you'll owe me. I met Attorney Monroe for coffee under the excuse of clarifying probate timelines. Instead, I asked what rights a spouse might have over inherited separate property. He explained carefully. Inherited assets usually remain separate if kept separate, but once commingled, joint accounts, shared expenses, title changes, they become easier to fight over. So if someone wanted access, I asked, they'd push for marriage first and mingling second? Yes, he said. That would be one way. That night, I drove past Caleb's condo on instinct and saw Sienna's car outside. Not parked casually. Overnight parked. I sat there in the dark with my engine off, feeling something harden inside me into shape. This wasn't messy passion. It was strategy with lipstick on it. The backup folder held one file they never expected me to open. The file was an exported text thread Caleb had saved from an old phone before upgrading. I almost missed it because the file name was bland, archive_miscellaneous. Zip, but inside was a folder of conversations backed up by date. I clicked on one from 6 months earlier, right around the time he proposed. It was between Caleb and Sienna. At first it read like flirtation with a side of poison. She's too trusting. That's because she thinks being needed equals being loved. You're awful. You like awful. I felt sick, but not surprised. Then the messages sharpened. Does her grandma still have that house? Yeah. Naomi helps her constantly. Pretty sure she's the favorite. So play nice until things settle. You say that like I'm not the one keeping this together. I had to stand up. My apartment suddenly felt too small for rage. I kept scrolling. If you marry her before any payout, don't get stupid and mix debt. I know how separate property works. Do you? Because your credit cards suggest otherwise. Relax. If she trusts me, she'll do what I suggest. She always wants peace. That one broke something in me that the cheating hadn't touched. Affairs can be selfish, reckless, pathetic. This was colder. This was them sitting outside my life with clipboards, discussing leverage. There were messages after the breakup too. She shattered. Give it a little time. What about the lawyer? Monroe's old school. Harder to charm. Work the mom angle. If Naomi sells the bungalow, you could help her invest. I dropped my phone onto the couch and covered my mouth because I made this horrible sound, half laugh and half sob. The proposal. The urgency around wedding timing. Caleb suddenly pretending to care about neighborhood appreciation rates. Sienna acting like family unity mattered. They hadn't just betrayed me physically. They'd audited my future. Annalise came over again that night. I showed her the thread without speaking. She read every line, then took off her glasses and said, "This is not a heartbreak problem anymore. This is an asset protection problem. People think the worst part of betrayal is discovering you were unloved. It isn't. The worst part is discovering you were studied. It was never about choosing her. It was about using me." My mother invited me to dinner the following Sunday and said, "No drama, please," before I'd even agreed to come. That told me exactly what kind of evening she intended to host. I almost refused. Annalise told me not to. Pressure reveals agenda, she said. Let them show you what they want. So I went. The table was set too carefully, candles lit in the middle like we were trying to romance our way past rot. Sienna sat beside my mother. Caleb arrived 10 minutes late with wine and an expression of solemn humility he probably practiced in the mirror. Nobody mentioned the affair for the first 20 minutes. We discussed weather, school testing, a neighbor's kitchen renovation. It was grotesque. A family performing normal over a sinkhole. Then my mother reached for my hand. Honey, grief makes people rigid. I almost laughed. Rigid? You've been through a lot, she said. And sometimes when we're hurt, we make permanent decisions from temporary feelings. What permanent decisions? I asked. My mother hesitated. Caleb made mistakes. Terrible ones. But if there's any chance to reconsider before you isolate yourself. Reconsider? I repeated. You want me to marry him after he slept with Sienna? No one said that. Caleb cut in quickly. I just think we owe our history a conversation. There it was, that polished, harmless language covering a blade. Sienna finally looked at me. You act like everybody's after you. I held her gaze. Aren't they? My mother started crying immediately. I'm trying to keep this family from tearing apart. No, I said quietly. You're trying to keep it comfortable. Caleb leaned forward. Naomi, listen. If this is about the house or whatever Monroe told you, I don't care about any of that. I care about you. Then why did you ask Mom whether the account was liquid? The silence after that felt alive. My mother's face changed first. Caleb recovered fast. I asked because I was worried people would take advantage of you. Because for one dangerous second, with my mother crying and the old version of me aching for peace, I felt the urge to let them rewrite me again. I might have folded if Annalise hadn't slid me that envelope. Inside the envelope was a printed copy of the text thread and a note in Aunt Elise's precise handwriting. Let them lie in front of witnesses. She had timed her entrance perfectly. She came late on purpose, carrying a store-bought pie and a face full of anti-innocence, then slipped into the seat beside me just as Caleb was reaching for moral high ground. I didn't open the envelope at the table. I just rested my hand on it and watched them all react to the possibility that I knew more than I'd said. Sienna's shoulders tightened. Caleb touched his glass, but didn't drink. My mother's crying slowed into wary silence. Attorney Monroe wants everyone present at the final transfer meeting on Thursday, Aunt Elise said lightly. There are a few family occupancy questions to clear up regarding the bungalow. That was technically true. Monroe had agreed to let me use the meeting as a controlled setting after I showed him the messages. He wasn't dramatic about it. He just said, if anyone is attempting to influence estate decisions through misrepresentation, it is better to establish a record with all relevant parties present. In other words, bring your snakes into the light. Caleb straightened. I don't need to be there. Annalise smiled. Then don't come. The trap worked because manipulative people can't resist a room they think they can manage. By Tuesday, Caleb was texting me gentler versions of himself again. I hate that I hurt you. I know I lost your trust. Whatever happens Thursday, please remember I loved you the best I could. Sienna changed tactics and called me from an unknown number while I was shelving returns at work. If you embarrass Mom at Monroe's office, I'll never forgive you. That would imply I still value your forgiveness. Thursday morning, I wore a navy dress, low heels, and the smallest pair of pearl earrings Grandma had ever given me. Not because I wanted to look powerful, because I wanted to feel like I belonged to myself. When Caleb walked into Monroe's office smiling softly, carrying that same polished regret like a prop, I understood something important. He still believed the room was his to steer. He still thought charm counted as evidence. When Caleb walked in smiling, I knew he still felt invincible. Monroe began with paperwork. That was the genius of it. No accusation, no dramatic speech, no cinematic opening. Just signatures, transfer language, explanations about title insurance, and distribution dates. The boring machinery of reality. People like Caleb do poorly in rooms where facts are numbered and time-stamped. My mother kept dabbing at her eyes. Sienna crossed and uncrossed her legs. Caleb leaned back in his chair like a man graciously tolerating inconvenience. Then Monroe asked whether anyone besides Naomi expected future occupancy rights or financial access connected to the bungalow or associated inherited funds. Caleb answered first. Of course not. I slid the first printed page across the table. Possible paths if Naomi inherits. Reconcile before transfer. Marriage equals easier influence. If she freezes me out, S can keep contact. For one glorious second, nobody moved. Then Caleb laughed. That's not what it looks like. I handed Monroe the text thread printout next. Dates visible. Names visible. Caleb and Sienna discussing separate property, my grief, and whether moving into the bungalow would make me easier to influence. Sienna went white. My mother whispered, "No." "Yes," I said, and for the first time in months my voice didn't shake. "Yes, actually. This is what you all kept asking me not to make ugly." Caleb tried the usual sequence. Minimize. Reframe. Attack. We were venting. You're taking jokes literally. You invaded privacy. You're weaponizing grief because you can't handle rejection. Monroe did not react emotionally. He simply asked whether Caleb or Sienna disputed authorship. Neither answered. Aunt Elise quietly passed over screenshots with metadata, cloud timestamps, email forwards, and call logs. Sienna cracked first. "Fine," she snapped. "He said stupid things. That doesn't mean there was some plan." Caleb turned on her immediately. "Don't do this." And there it was, their romance, evaporating under fluorescent lighting. Monroe recommended all future communication regarding the estate go through his office. Annalise asked if I wanted to leave. I stood up and looked at Caleb, then at Sienna. Not vindication. Recognition. For the first time, neither of them had anywhere to hide. The fallout was less explosive than people imagined and more expensive. Caleb lost access to my life first, then to other things. His employer didn't fire him over the affair, but a separate review started after one of his business development expenses turned out to involve a weekend he'd falsely billed while meeting Sienna. Last I heard, he resigned before they finished asking questions. Sienna moved out of my mother's house for a month, then back in when money got tight, which almost felt fitting. My mother and I barely spoke that fall. When we did, every conversation limped toward the same wall. She wanted me to admit everyone had been under stress, and I wanted her to admit she had asked me to sacrifice my dignity for family optics. Stress is not an alibi. Silence is not neutrality. The relationship is no longer built on pretending. I kept the bungalow. Not because it was the smartest financial move, though Monroe said it was solid. I kept it because Grandma planted rosemary by the back steps and painted the guest room ceiling pale blue because she believed even empty rooms deserved tenderness. I spent weekends cleaning it out slowly. I found recipe cards, old church bulletins, a coffee tin full of buttons, and a note tucked into a dictionary that read, "Don't let hungry people name your worth." That line did more for me than revenge ever could. I didn't need a glamorous reinvention to prove I'd won. I stayed exactly who I was. Practical, steady, a woman whose life made sense even when other people wanted to turn it into leverage. I kept the inherited account separate. I changed passwords, updated beneficiaries, and learned more probate vocabulary than any grieving granddaughter should need. If there's advice in any of this, it's painfully simple. When betrayal happens, do not rush to be gracious before you have been accurate. Save the screenshots. Ask the boring legal questions. Notice who gets very interested in your forgiveness the moment money appears. And never confuse being chosen with being valued.